Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in again to Candy's Prayer Closet. So, we're on episode 6. You guys have kept checking back in, or if you're new for the first time, we typically share stories. We share testimonies of people with what people's life was like before they surrendered to the Lord and what God has done for them after the fact. I'm so excited to bring you guys another good friend of mine, Justin Sappel. But his testimony is going to be a little different than what we've done in the past. So we've been trying to make sure that in one episode, we not only have the before, but we make sure to get the glory story to show everybody what God has done for these people. Well, in this instance, it's going to be a little different. We're actually going to have a 3-episode part. So Justin's will be first. My very best friend, Rhonda Sappel, which is his wife, will be second. And then the third one will be where they come together and we finally get to see the glory story. So don't give up at the end of this one. It doesn't end bad. There's more to come, but you got to tune in next week and then make sure you tune in the week after that for sure, because we will then have them come together and share what the Lord has done for them in their family. I'm so excited to share Justin's testimony. So here we go. Hello. Thank you guys for joining Candy's Prayer Closet. Today, I have one of my really good friends. It's actually my best friend's husband, Justin Sappel, here with us today. And he's going to share his testimony with us. I want to go ahead and throw out there that most of our testimonies that we've shared so far, we've made sure that it's a complete glory story at the end. But this one's going to be a little different. It's actually going to be a 3-part series. So we're going to share Justin's bad, and we're going to share his wife Rhonda's bad on the next episode. And then the episode after that will be where they come together and they both are living for the Lord, and you'll get to see what God can really do. So don't just end with this one. Make sure that you at least do the follow-up and see what God's done in Justin's life. So I just want to go ahead and throw that out there at the beginning, and we're just going to dive in. So Justin, we are going to start from the time you were a child, and we're going to work until the time that basically you and Rhonda get together. That's okay. What we're going to do here. So I want you to talk about life as a young child. Like, what was your life like growing up?
Well, as a young child, I had what I felt like was a perfect life, and I think most people, it might not fit up to some people's standards, but it was a very comfortable life. We had everything we needed. Well, I had a big family, and we were all really close: aunts, uncles, cousins, my grandma, grandpas. Everyone was really close, and it was just a big, tight knit family. And like I said, we didn't have a lot of money, but we didn't know we didn't have money.
Right.
We had everything we needed, and most of all,
two parents, married,
two parents,
siblings,
happy home, happy home life. And it was, it was the kind of life where anyone would be happy to have it, like there was nothing to be ashamed of. There was no, there wasn't
a normal family.
Yeah, just a normal family. Just everyone was close and loved each other. And
there was one thing missing, but y'all didn't know it.
The only problem with our life was there was no God in it. My parents, even though they might have believed in God, they weren't raised in church. They hadn't spent their life in church.
They didn't know any better.
So they weren't raising us in church, and so we were missing a very important figure in our life, and that's God. And
right. But like I said, y'all didn't know that.
We didn't know.
You didn't know any better. And they didn't really know any better either.
Right.
So during this time, what was your relationship with your dad? Like, what did you think about your dad?
He was my hero. He was, like, I didn't realize once I was grown until I had a son of my own, right, how much of a hero my dad was to me. Because I went back through some pictures yesterday, and every picture would be me and my dad,
yeah.
me and my dad. He was like, my dad was a real big guy. And so, like, I felt like that as long as he was around, there was nothing that could hurt me or nothing.
I had no fear.
No fear, complete comfort when he was around, and he was like a really likable guy. Everybody loved him, funny, just
You mentioned in your
going.
notes that he could fix anything.
Could work on anything, do
That's
anything.
a big deal for a young boy to
Yeah,
say.
like I just felt like my dad can fix it. Like it don't matter what it is, my dad can fix it.
Well, you know what, Zachariah, like he breaks a toy or he does something, and I'm like, baby, like that, it's broken. Like we need to throw it away. It's not good. And he's like, Daddy will fix it.
Yeah, Daddy will fix it.
Daddy will fix it.
That's the way I felt.
Yeah. So he owned a trucking company, so he was a truck driver for a living.
When I was real young, he worked different jobs, logging and driving truck a little here and there. But he was, for the early years of my life, he was home most of the time. He might be gone some through the week, but he was home a lot more when I was younger. And
as you got a little older,
then as I got a little older, he had started a trucking company and was doing really well with it, and which he was gone all week. So my mom, she was a stay-at-home mom, and she took great care of us. We had what seemed like the perfect life. Like I said, we had a very structured life, kind of like with you and Zachariah.
Yeah, very scheduled, and
we every day when she come in, from school, she had us food ready. We would eat, we'd play, she'd get us washed up, put us in bed at the same time every night.
Yeah,
close to the same time. We had two little ones instead of just one, so
yeah,
they would play off that. But very structured life. Just a normal the all American life.
Okay, so life was good. Your mom had a real structure. It was a normal life, happy life. And then around 10 or 11 of your age, your dad started.
When I was about 10, my whole life kind of got turned upside down, so to speak. My dad started using speed or meth, and so things started just gradually changing, for the worse. And he got to where he was pretty regular to call home, like when he was on the road, we'd hear from him all the time,
Right.
And it got to where he wouldn't call home as much, and there was even times when we wouldn't hear from him for days, and we'd be worried, like
I can't imagine.
When you're waiting on a phone call and it doesn't come through for days, you're wondering, oh my gosh, is he dead somewhere?
And back then, it wasn't like social media.
You didn't have cell phones where you could reach somebody every minute you wanted to. It was, you're waiting and you're thinking, oh my gosh, something's happened.
Because I haven't heard.
Right. And he even did end up. He had been up and passed out behind the wheel and crashed his big truck, and just stuff started getting real rocky. It started, him being gone all week started turning into more of a party while he was gone instead of just work while he was gone. He
probably was home a lot less, and when he was home, things probably wasn't good.
When he was home, he slept a lot because that was, he would be up running and doing drugs during the week, and so when he would come home, when he was around us kids and stuff, he would be crashed out sleeping. And when a truck driver comes home, they're always wore out at the end of the week, right?
Yeah.
But it was extra wore out. Like when we noticed that as kids, because like instead of sleeping in on Saturday, he might sleep all Saturday, and so we're like, what's wrong? Like we get a few hours with him on Sunday before he would be leaving back out again.
So during this time, like, how was your mom? Like, as far as, when they were still together and he's coming home and he's crashing and he's not calling, like, what is she, how is she dealing with you guys? Is she wavering, or is the structure still there and she's just trying to be consistent?
The structure was still there because most of the time he was gone. But when he was home, there was lots of fighting, lots of just unknown, because everything was secretive from us because we're kids, right? But there's no hiding when you're fighting, and there's no hiding that something's wrong. Anytime there's something wrong, the kids know it.
Yeah,
they automatically know.
That'll bring conviction on all of us right there, or it does me anyway. So after 15 years of marriage, your mom is...
She's had enough. You can't... I don't blame her a bit.
No, I can't imagine.
It wasn't like she gave him opportunity to stop doing what he was doing, and he didn't,
Yeah.
for
Well,
whatever.
and even though they weren't, she wasn't living for the Lord or anything at that time. I mean, I believe that's abandonment. I mean, what do you do?
Right.
What do you do?
I mean, it's like the addict is choosing the drug over their
Yep.
family. It's not that she wanted it
No.
to be that way.
Right.
He chose it over us at that time.
So, do you remember what year that was? How
I
old were
don't.
you? Do
I
you?
was in. I was going into sixth grade. It was during my sixth grade year. That year was terrible.
Okay. So, talk to us about the following, that whole year that followed. What happened?
Well, at first there was a time there where, like I said, it was like she gave him opportunity to try to get right. So
Hmm.
there was a time there where there was some like thinking that maybe they're going to get back together, and as a kid, you're like that's what you want, right?
Yeah.
And so there was some thinking that they were going to get back together, and there was like a little bit of back and forth, and then once she realized that things weren't getting better, and she was just done, then
Right.
that's when it went from just a little bit of turmoil to
Bad.
bad. Like the guy who had been our protector and our like our rock for our whole life now has become our tormentor because he made it his mission to torment her. Like if
Make her
it
life
was like if I
miserable.
can't have you, then you're going to be miserable.
Right.
And
Which
I
I'm
think
sure is confusing because you're like, but you didn't want to be with us, So then you're
but
like, what do you?
in his mind, he was at that time he was so spun out
Right.
that nothing made sense. He wasn't thinking like a normal person. And
And we're going to talk about that a little later about how you could relate to that,
right.
later on. But so there was torment. He quit his job.
Oh
he
yeah,
was
he had
just
completely quit trying to live
working
a normal life. No working. He was
on
all
drugs and
on
tormenting
drugs,
y'all.
and he would spend 24 hours a day just
Mm.
doing nothing but tormenting us. I don't know how he
Well,
found
and for
time to do
anybody
anything.
that knows what it's like to be on drugs or has family that is really, really spun out, I mean, they'll get that. Like,
Yeah.
they'll understand that.
I mean, he would drive by our house all hours of the night, and as a kid, like you're thinking, what is he doing? Like I mean, it
You're
scared us. It
scared,
scared us
yeah.
to death. Like we didn't know what was going on. It might have been a funny or a game to him at the time, but it wasn't funny to us. It was scary
Yeah, I'm
as a
sure.
child.
I'm sure for your mom too. Like, oh, I can't imagine.
And so that went on for a while. We would call the cops, and they would be like, "Well, we can't do anything. It's a public highway," and so we're like, so he can just drive by our house all hours of the night, and that's not stalking. Like rev his truck up every time he
Letting you
goes
know
by,
he's
and
there.
yeah, letting us know he's there, but you can't do anything. And basically, they just wouldn't do anything. And so that went on for a while. And my mom was on her way to work one day, and she was working out here at Batesville before we moved out here. We originally lived at Strawberry, and he had, of course, he was stalking her. So he had figured out that she was working, and he had sat down the road and waited for her to go by. Well, when she goes by, he chases her down, gets her stopped, kidnaps her. We get a call that my mom's been kidnapped, and so here we are. We're all scared to death, and we don't know where they're at and what's going on. And
Right.
luckily, he didn't hurt her. He just, in his mind, I'd talked to him about it years later, and in his mind, he said, "I just wanted to talk to her. I wanted to talk to her, and I wanted to make her. I was going to make her talk to me one way or another, and she wouldn't do it. So that's what I'm like.
That's not okay.
It's not worth going to prison over, right?
Right.
Not to me, but he wasn't thinking like that.
And so, mentioning prison, that actually led to prison.
He ended up he got arrested, of course, and he went to prison, and so like the constant turmoil, the constant like knots in your stomach, it's gone. Like we had relief, like I can relate to people,
you could go to bed and know that he wasn't going to be
right. We don't have to worry about him tonight. He's locked up in a jail cell. Those people out there that have been hurt or have family members killed and they don't know who it is, and they're just in that constant turmoil of wondering, are they going to do something else? I can relate to that because that's how we were to somebody we loved, you know.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so he went to prison, and life smoothed out for a while, you know. Like my mom,
Well, it
she was
smoothed
working really
out,
hard,
but
and
it changed
it
because now
it
mom's working
changed.
2
And
jobs.
she went from being a stay-at-home mom to working 2 jobs to support us, and
You
uh,
kind of lost. I mean, you didn't lose your mom, but now your mom's having to fight to survive, fight to pay the bills, fight to
right.
take care of your kids, and
And
so
she'd been
you
a
lost
stay-at-home mom.
him.
She'd been a stay-at-home mom my whole life, you know. Like
So she was always there.
right, she was always there.
Mm.
And so at this point, you know, things are starting to change, and it went pretty smooth though. Like, you know, we managed pretty good. She worked hard to make sure we had everything we needed, and we managed pretty good for uh, several years there, and then
So
then
now, before that, what you're fixing to say, you hated drugs,
I hated it.
because you saw
Because
firsthand.
I felt like that my father, he loved us. You know, I knew that as a kid that my dad loved me, right?
Yeah,
And I didn't understand it, but he chose that drug over me.
yeah,
That's what I
that's
felt.
yeah.
So I hated drugs, especially meth.
Hmm.
I didn't know anything about the other drugs really. You know, my dad had smoked pot my whole life,
Right,
but he he smoked pot and loved us still. He didn't choose it over
exactly,
us, you know.
exactly.
But this drug, it had like a hold on him that we couldn't compete with.
Yeah, he chose it, but he
Right,
couldn't. I mean, he didn't have a choice.
right.
And I'm not taking away from the fact that you can get clean and you can get sober and you can choose differently, but there is a stage in there where you can't. I believe that.
It's I can relate now, and I would never have been able to get clean without Jesus Christ in my life.
Mm,
Um, the hold it has is so powerful, and especially if you're not miserable. Like, and when I say that, like, not that it hadn't taken everything from you,
right.
but if it doesn't make you, the feeling you get when you do it doesn't make you miserable, then
You
you're
want
not
to
going
do
to want to
it.
quit.
Yeah, you want to
If
do
it's
it.
numbing, like, even though it may have caused all that stuff to go away,
It
if
still helped him
if
deal with it.
if it was what was numbing his feelings at the time, so
Right.
even though it took everything, he's turning to it to
To fix it.
fix it.
And we're fixing to talk about how you can relate to all that.
Oh yeah,
So at the age of 15, you started dating a girl,
yeah.
and talk to us about that.
Around 15, I got not the first real relationship I was ever in, and it was just, it ended up being a very serious relationship,
Hmm.
especially for a 15-year-old. Um, this this girl, I fell in love with her. I mean, we ended up dating for like 8.5 years, off and
Off and
on, and
on.
um, we had, when you're that young and it's that serious relationship, you know, a lot of times there's problems because, for one, you've never dated anybody else, so you're both wondering, you know, like, is this the person I'm supposed to marry and settle
Right.
down with, or is there more? You know, is there something else out there? Is there someone else out there?
Well, and you're
So
just your hormones and you're learning and you have no wisdom and
right,
you're just flying by the seat of your pants at that age.
right,
I mean, in reality,
yes,
dating as a teenager is awful. I'm glad I will never have to go back.
especially without Jesus, because
Yes,
when you throw in all the sin that
come
comes
with
along
it.
with it, it just changes everything. But it takes something that's supposed to be pure and supposed to be
Sweet
uh,
and special and
special in the eyes of the Lord, and it completely destroys
destroys it.
that. Yeah. And so when me and her had been dating for about probably 4 years or so, we had, during one of our little breakups or whatever, a friend of mine had offered me to do meth, and I was completely blown away because I had no idea that any of my friends done drugs.
Right.
They were really secretive about it around me, right? So
And so you're 19.
I'm 19, and how it was offered to me, literally, my friend he's been running around with me, and he just chops it out on the table and offers it to me, and it's like, "Hey, you want some of this?" And I'm like, in that split second, I chose the wrong decision for sure. But I had a moment of weakness, and
Well, because you were broken up, and so you
I
was
was
all in your
heartbroken,
feelings anyway.
and you're just kind of down on life at the time, and so I was like, sure, and
So tell me about that first time. Like, was it an immediate hold on you, or was it, something that, oh, it's okay because it's not a hold, I can do it, and, do it a few times? Or
I
how did it
I
become
had
an
had
addiction?
people like I know it is a drug, but marijuana and alcohol like I'd been around them my whole
It
life,
was
right?
normal. Same.
And I'd had people offer them to me my whole life, and I had turned it down my whole life. And so I had in my mind, I'm like, I'm a strong-willed person. If I decide I want to quit tomorrow, I can quit.
Right.
So I convinced myself that I'd be able to
It'd be
quit.
fine.
It'll be fine. You can quit tomorrow if you want. But the problem is tomorrow I didn't want to quit because it numbed those feelings
So you
that
wanted to numb it again.
and I enjoyed it, So you won't quit something that you enjoy. That's the hardest thing you'll ever overcome is something that you enjoy doing. And so that took me on a 16-year.
Pleasures of sin for a
Yeah.
season.
Yeah. And you'll pay for it.
Yeah. So it turned into a 16-year addiction.
Yes.
In your early 20s, so you've been using, you've been off and on. So I guess you and the girlfriend had gotten back together
We'd gotten back
after
together.
using,
Um,
but then on and off.
It was, yeah, we had gotten back together off and on, and we're using together, and um, it was rocky a little bit before, but when you throw drugs in the mix,
It
then
messes everything
there was
up.
no chance of it ever really working, because I didn't start dabbling in drugs from the day that I started doing drugs. I was an everyday user. Like through that 16 years, there was probably 2 or 3 times that I went long enough without drugs that I could pass a drug test. 2 or 3 times in 16 years.
Yeah.
And that
it
was
takes just a couple days with meth.
like probably 4 days or something,
Yeah, 3 or 4.
and probably 2 or 3 times in that whole 16 years. So, so things, of course, didn't work out. And after about 8.5 years, we
Broke up for
parted
good.
ways for good. And of course, that was an addict will, like I said before with my dad, they will use stuff like that as a coping skill when they're hurt, right? So instead of ever dealing with your emotions,
You just numb
you
it.
just numb it with the drug. And so that's what I did there. Instead of dealing with what was going on in my life, I just kept using more and more.
So at this point, you're heartbroken, you're jobless, you're homeless,
Yeah.
and your addiction was your relief and your curse.
Yeah. Yeah. I had basically become exactly what I hated about my dad. Like when I say I hated about my dad. I didn't hate my dad, but the things that he had done that I hated was what I'd become. That was what my life had come down to.
And I'm sure at that point you hadn't looked in the mirror and realized that, but I'm sure later on at some point.
Um, believe it or not, I did realize that because see, me and my dad, when I had started using.
Yeah, let's talk about y'all reconnected at some point
Right.
after you had become an addict.
Well, when I had started using at 19, right around that time, my dad, of course, by that time he was out of prison, and
Was he using again also?
yeah,
Okay.
I don't know that he was ever clean for very long either. So around 19, maybe 20, me and him reconnected, but it wasn't really like I wanted a father figure back in my life, like I wanted my dad back. But I kind of settled for what I could get, which was a buddy. Me and him were more like buddies. He become my friend instead of my father, and so we were using together, and so I can relate a little bit to how he was because, like, I looked at him and I seen that it was like I was looking in the mirror. Like I realized that I get where he was coming from all
Well,
those
during
years.
this time, you said you realized that he was still in love with your mom.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
When I started, when I was after I had gotten back in touch with him, and of course I started being around him all the time because we were living the same life, right? So he was kind of my go to, like my
your best
buddy,
friend.
yeah. And so the more I was around him, the more I realized that he didn't he still was in love with my mom just like he was when they were married,
Yeah.
and he was he still loved me and my sisters, and there was times that I would be around him because we were hanging out getting high, and he would be talking about my sisters like any father would, like he wanted something to do with them, but he wasn't really having anything to do with them because
But that
he
was his
was
heart.
right. He wanted to, but he couldn't get past the addiction part long enough
And the only reason he had a relationship with you is
because I was okay with the addiction because I was in the same
and you were
addiction.
doing it too.
Right. And they weren't, so they were kind of, and I would, it would just give me so much turmoil because I would see that he wanted something to do with them, and I would see that they wanted something to do with him. But I was kind of like caught in the middle, and I'm like, I felt like he was having something to do with me, and I'm like, do they understand why he has something to do with me and not them? Because he can feel comfortable around me because we're both high,
Yeah. So it was just probably adding more feelings that you didn't want to deal with. So you got high more.
Right? Yeah. It's just a never ending cycle.
Yeah.
It all just builds and builds and.
So in 2007, you got shot. Tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about that. What happened there?
In 2007, I was at a friend's house, and we had been doing drugs, and I was asleep on the couch, and the these people kicked the door in, and they hit me in the like as when they kicked the door in, they were facing me and I sat up, and they hit me in the face with a pistol. And when they hit me in the face with the pistol, they shot me in the back of the head, and if I would have died right then, I would have busted the gates of hell wide open because I didn't know Jesus Christ. And I didn't have any kind of relationship with God, And he he
You
spared
saved
me
your
that
life.
day.
Yeah.
I mean, I when you think about getting shot in the head, you think rehab and recovery and like long hospital stays, and I was admitted into the ER. It went in went under the skin like, and then right back out. And it was a 45. It wasn't like this was a little
Yeah.
caliber. And I was released from the hospital in like a few hours. By the time my mom even knew about it, I was already released and was showing up at her house. But it was a pretty traumatic thing for her. I can't imagine if
Oh,
if
yeah.
I
And your
got
sisters, and I'm sure
my
everybody.
sister got a call. I didn't have a phone at the time, and so somebody in the emergency room knew my sister, and and so they got a hold of her and said, "Hey, your brother's in the emergency room," and she came and picked me up, and like, so here she is coming. You never know what you're expecting when you get there, and you find out that your brother's been shot in the head. And
Yeah.
it
I
was it
mean,
was pretty
that's
traumatic
scary.
for them,
And one. Okay. So you got shot, traumatic event. About 2 years later, somewhere in there, 2009, your ex girlfriend died.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What did that do?
Even though we hadn't been together for several years, I mean, it'd been, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. When you have been with somebody that long, and you love them, it's a very traumatic thing when they're just
Do you
tragically
feel
taken.
like maybe, I mean, were you still feeling for her? I mean, clearly not to the extent of your dad, but do you think maybe there was some similarities there? Like, because you were living in that same drugged out mind the whole time. So did you still have love for her the way that, your dad kind of still had love because he was in that same, you're just in this cycle. So time runs together, time gets away from you.
Yeah, I mean, I still loved her, but we had lots of baggage that I mean, I don't think that it wasn't like we was ever going to get back
Get back
together,
together.
but I like when you
You still really cared about
when
her.
you love somebody and you really love them and you've been with them that long, there's a bond there that like you just feel like even if you're never with them again, you know like
You're
you
always going to care about
you're
them.
always going to care about that person. And she was my first love. Like I just there was always going to be a love
Something.
for her there, you know.
Yeah.
And
So she died tragically.
Yes.
It was a tragic death.
Yeah.
So then, a couple years later, 2012.
So during all this time, you know, like my life is just coming with all the things that addiction brings. It's coming with, well, homelessness. It's coming with lies, cheating, and stealing, and like
All the
just
things.
everything that all the horror stories that you hear about
That's the
addiction.
life you were
That's
in.
the life I was in, and so about I guess it was is it 3 years after?
Yeah,
I think around 3 years
2012.
after she had passed. Me and my dad, we had this about 2 years after she had passed. Me and my dad had a big falling out. And looking back now, it was stupid on my part because it was about money. And I just want to throw a disclaimer out there: don't ever disown someone for money because money will be gone someday, and that person might be gone, and you can't have that person back. Money is nothing. Um, my my dad I felt like he had cheated me and my sisters out of some money. We had a, a family farm, and he had collected the rent off of it, and that was supposed to be all of ours, and we had bills to pay with it, and he had spent it on drugs.
Right.
Me being the addict too, I should have understood that a little bit, but
Yeah.
I didn't have any compassion on him, and so I got mad and I blew up, and I hadn't talked to him but like one or two times
In a year.
in a year, and I get a call that my dad had wrecked a motorcycle and that it was bad, and he was being airlifted to Memphis, and so of course I rush home and
Elvis
me and
Presley Trauma Center,
yep
I'm assuming.
yep the trauma
I've had
center,
that call before.
and me and my mom and my sisters and we all rush over there, and when we get there, it was I mean, it was bad. He wasn't wearing a helmet or anything, and he was going like 100 mile an hour, and it just I'm surprised he made it there. You know,
Right. Yeah. So you lost your dad.
yeah, and see, like when I had lost Diana out of my life, you know, like breaking up, I had grew closer with my dad. Well,
You had somebody to fall back on.
right then when she died, um, he was always that through all that time, he was that person who, because we were in the same lifestyle, I could confide in him about things, you know, and like I could feel comfortable around him and not have to not feel judged, even though people
Right.
weren't judging me. When you're in that lifestyle, you feel judged. You go around
Everybody's
people
judging you.
right?
Yeah.
You think they're going to judge you, even though they're not. They're not looking at it the same you are.
Right.
I'm not saying they don't judge people who are in that life. I'm just saying that I would assume that they would judge me before I ever gave
Part
them
of
the
the
chance.
paranoia.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't even give them the chance, you know, like you
Yeah.
just avoid that, you know? So I end up, I hadn't talked to him in about a year, and I lost my dad. And at the time that I lost my dad, though, you know, I had dated Rhonda
Hmm.
for a brief period of time before that, probably about 6 months, and she had gotten sober, and me and her, we both run with the same people and done the same things, but when during the time we were dating, she was like, I'm getting sober, you know, I'm tired of this life, I'm gonna straighten up, you know.
Rando was in the
Right.
picture then, right?
Yes, Miranda was. She was 2.5 or so, and so she's like, my daughter needs me, you know, and I've got to. I can't do this anymore.
Right.
And so she kind of gave me an ultimatum, and I done the
Drugs.
same thing my dad did. You know, I chose the drugs over over her. And but when my dad died, um, the night that I got the call, Rhonda was with me. She was there for me through that. And then a couple years after that, another real close friend of mine.
And so this is in 2015, and you and Rhonda are not together at this point. Y'all had broken up.
No, at this point, me and Rhonda had actually gotten back together for the
In
second time.
2015. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we started dating again in 20. Well, right after my dad had died, we ended up getting back together, and which she had relapsed. So I was
There was no ultimatum
right,
anymore,
there's
so
no
it was
ultimatum,
okay.
so it's okay. And so we get back together, and so she's starting to fill that hole that I had, for like a friend or a comfort.
Yeah.
And then in 15, another really good friend of mine who we had been through a lot together. He had some really traumatic stuff happen with his son through the years, and he had confided in me, and then like with my dad and everything, I confided in him.
It was one of your best friends.
Really close friend, and he died in a car wreck. It's like that. The life I was living, it just took. And
Yeah.
back when I had gotten in that life, it was like it was just a fun party time. I felt like it was just a good time. And then now all of a sudden, there's people always getting busted and going to jail, and people dying, and just people's lives just being destroyed. And it's like it had such a hold on us that even though all that's happening, you can't quit.
Right. So he passes away in 15. When did you and Rhonda get together for the final time? Do you remember what
It
year?
was in 12.
It was in 12.
Yeah.
So y'all have been together since
Right.
2012.
Pretty much since my dad had died. It was just a couple months after he had died that we got together, and we had moved in together. And then
and we won't go too much into that because that's where I want to go. Of course, I want to keep going with the story, but we're gonna kind of try to wind it down. But I want you to hit on
the reason I was going to that is after me and Rhonda had got together in 2012. In 2013, we had a son. Well, back up a little.
Lost
around the time that we had first got together, she had gotten pregnant.
Yeah.
And she lost that baby. Yeah. And so that was another
loss.
Another thing to just push you further down.
And looking back, looking back, you wonder like, was God taking all these people to break me?
Right. Was it my fault? Was it my sin that caused it? Was it? You just never know.
You never know.
I'll never know this side of heaven. But so we end up. She get in 2013. She has another baby, and
you probably found out that you were pregnant pretty shortly after your dad died.
She found out she was pregnant. Yeah, really
close to that. I'm sure
after the first time, and then it was. I think it was around New Year's of the next year that she got pregnant with Sam, and so we have here we have this precious baby, this little precious baby boy, and I look at him, and all of a sudden, it's like I'm in my dad's shoes. Here I am. I've got the baby. I've got the
wow.
girlfriend at the time. Like the home life is there,
waiting on you.
And I'm still choosing. I couldn't break that addiction. Like I kept choosing it over them, over and over and over, because I just couldn't stop. I remember times when he was a little baby, and Rhonda's mom was sick, and they were staying there helping take care of her, that I would get off work, and I got off work around 5, right? She would say, we call Sam Bubby, and she would say, Bubby's wanting daddy, And so she would message me that. I'd get off work at 5, and I'd be like, well, I'm gonna go home, and I'm gonna take a shower, and I'm gonna get high, and then I'm gonna go see Sam. All right, because if I don't get high, then I'll just go to sleep when I get there. That's the thoughts that are going through my brain at this point. So I go home and I get cleaned up, and I start getting high, and I start getting high, and I start getting high, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to go, or he's going to be in bed. And I get there, and of course by this time it's probably 9:30 or something, and
Yeah.
she's like, he's asleep. He's been in bed for a while, and I'm like, you know, I was trying to get here. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, just like
Yeah.
no excuse, just
Getting high.
getting high.
So I want you to talk about, because like I said, we're not getting much of a glory story to end this with, because that's going to come later, but you're at this point where you're a daddy. And I want you to talk about the things that you feel could have been different and how important a father is and just the role that a dad plays. Like, just talk to us about all of that.
Well, first off, I want to say that when I was with Diana, I had told her we kind of made a promise to each other if she ever got pregnant that we would quit doing all drugs, and we would straighten up and we'd live a normal life. Well, of course, then in my mind, I had always felt like if I ever had a kid, that would be my reason to straighten up, right? Because I
Right.
didn't want to do to them what had been done to me. And so I felt like that's that's when it's time to draw the line.
Yeah.
But when it came time to draw the line, I couldn't. I couldn't. I kept stepping over. And so here I am. I'm a father, and like I just don't know what to do. I'm in the same rut.
Yep.
But I wholeheartedly know now that
What was missing?
what was missing was God. If if I would have been, if my dad had have known Jesus Christ and been living for Jesus Christ, I think my dad was saved. He just never he never
It
followed
had the
through with
same
it.
hold. Yeah.
Um, if he had have been
The
living a
spiritual
Christian
leader.
life, if he had been doing the role that he was given by God and been the head of the household, the spiritual leader of the house, it all been different. None
Yeah.
of that downhill slide for him or for me could have happened because
Well,
it could
that
have
goes back to those
Jesus.
generational curses.
Right.
I mean,
But when it comes down to it, if you're a father, you're going to be a role model, whether you want to be or not.
yeah.
It's like
Especially
it's
if you have a
born.
son.
It's like it's born into a son to follow after their daddy's footsteps, and it doesn't matter if you are being a good one or a bad one. They're gonna follow after you.
Well, but
And
I want to bring in too that for a little girl, that's what she's going to believe is okay.
right,
And I'm sure, you can relate to some of that too, as far as how it affects girls because you have sisters. But having a daddy, for just the role that a daddy plays, I mean, is just so instrumental in either what a boy turns out to be, but what a girl, decides is okay, like in her life.
right.
So go ahead and, finish what you were saying there. I know I cut you off because it just inserted my brain there, but
So when it comes down to it, now I know that being the spiritual leader is the most important role you can play as a father, or
period.
I mean, if there's someone out there that's dealing with addiction, that maybe you're not dealing with addiction, maybe you're just not being the father that you feel like you should be. You're not leading your children to Christ. You're not taking your children to church. It's your job, and it could change everything. And if you want to be able to look back someday and not have any regrets because you know you've done everything you could for them, take them to church, teach them about God. It could have changed everything for us. And I say this because I can look back and I know my daddy loved me, but his life didn't show that he loved me. And he didn't intend for it to be that way. That's the hold that drugs and alcohol and that life have on people. And if you're dealing with that, it's time to break it. Jesus Christ is the only way to break that addiction.
Amen. And I'd like to point out that you did break that. And if Sam grows up and makes bad decisions, you will be that daddy that can say, I did everything I could. I put him in the hands of Jesus, and, which Sam is a great kid, and I don't believe that will happen. But I'm just saying, like you told them, if you want to be able to have clean hands, that's the answer. Take them to church.
And I pray, not only do I take them to church, and I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm far from perfect, and I'm far from the perfect father. But I know where they can get their help. And that's not me. That's Jesus Christ. So I take them to where I know they can get the help. And not only am I taking them there, I pray constantly that God will not put on them the curses from me or from my father or from Rhonda's father. Like the lives that they lived, like you said, it brings generational curses.
It does.
We follow in our parents' footsteps, and unless you break that, then it's going to keep carrying on. And that's one of the things that helped me to get clean, is to see that my son's going to do the same thing I did. He's going to continue.
I did what my dad did. He's going to do what I did. Right. Somebody's got to break it. Yeah. And that's like you brought up the other day, that the domino effect that Brother Robert preaches on. Like, I carry that domino in my purse, because even though, like with my story, I didn't become the drug addict, but my life was, a mess because of that lifestyle that I
chose different sin.
I chose different sin. That's exactly right.
It's the sinful lifestyle that, and that's just like with me. I just happened to use the same drug as my dad. Yep. A lot of times it doesn't work out that way, but lots of times
the generational curse can be as simple as not living for the Lord.
Right. And
because your mom, she was in that generational curse of, she wasn't using drugs or anything, but she wasn't living for the Lord, so she didn't raise her children that way. Right. Well, Justin, you got anything you want to throw out there before we close?
I'd just like to say that I want to thank the Lord Jesus Christ for delivering me and my family. And I pray that this can help someone. I didn't share my testimony to destroy my dad, because I love my dad and he loved me. I share my testimony because I want people to know that no matter how much you love someone, when you're living in active addiction, you're not loving that person like you should be. And it's going to affect their life, whether you want it to or not. It's time to choose your family. It's time to choose God and break that curse.
Amen. Thank you for coming, Justin. I appreciate you. Stay tuned for next week. We'll be back. Well, what can I say? I told you it was going to be a journey. So make sure you tune in next week for Rhonda's. Remember, The one after that is going to be the glory story for both of them. So be sure that you tune into that as well. We want you guys not to focus on the bad, the negative, the sin. We want you guys to focus on what God can do if you surrender your life to Him. So tune in next week and the week after that, because this journey is not over.